everyone, it's Mrs. Clemens. Welcome to another lesson on the Great Depression. All right, so last time we were talking about the specific plans from FDR's New Deal, and today we're going to talk about some of the criticism that he faced and also some of the issues that he faced in actually implementing it. All right, so we know that FDR was definitely a popular president. He's ranked as one of our best presidents in history, but please do not think that everybody loved him, because that is definitely not the case. There were definitely Republicans who criticized him for, they even threw around the word socialist, saying that, we're a laissez-faire capitalist economy and there's way too much government involvement, that this broke the precedent of everything that we had going throughout most of our history. So there's definitely a lot of that criticism. But there's also criticism in terms of people who thought that FDR was not doing enough. There were people like Father Charles Coughlin and Huey Long, who is also known as the Kingfish. And he said something, and I think you guys will find this sort of interesting given what's going on today, that everyone should be getting not just these plans from the New Deal, but everyone should be given a one-time cash handout. Back then it was $5,000, and then an actual income every year annually given to every family. So definitely there were a lot of people that were criticizing him. Part of the idea overall that we need to know is this is a change from laissez-faire. Definitely when we were looking at the presidents from the 20s, like Coolidge and Harding and Hoover, definitely we have ended that. The fact that he's providing jobs and direct cash handouts. And also there's a huge amount of regulation that's happening, which again hadn't happened to that extent before. And the last time that regulations really had ramped up was at the time of his cousin during Teddy Roosevelt's presidency. And this is obviously something we've talked about in class, but definitely increased the national debt. And again, if you look at what's going on today, they're already talking about how the various stimulus packages are going to impact our debt. All right, so we talked about some of individuals' reactions to the New Deal. The Supreme Court also reacted. And so there are two Supreme Court cases that you need to know for both the Regents exam and the AP exam. So the first one is Schechter Poultry Corporation versus the United States. And so it ruled that the NRA, which was part of NERA, unconstitutional. And they said that it violated the ideas of federalism. Basically, what it was doing was it was giving way too much power to the executive part of the government and taking away authority from Congress and the states, and so it was found unconstitutional. And then a little bit later, we have the case U.S. versus Butler that ruled that the Agricultural Adjustment Administration was unconstitutional. And so again, that it was giving powers to the legislative branch, or legislative powers to the executive branch that violated those checks and balances. So, as you might imagine, FDR was not happy about this, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But in the meantime, we have a multiple choice break. So again, this is a Regents question. So an immediate result of the Supreme Court decisions in Schechter Poultry Corporation versus the United States and U.S. versus Butler in 1936 was that state governments took over relief agencies. Some aspects of the New Deal were declared unconstitutional. Congress was forced to abandon efforts to improve the economy, or the constitutional authority of the president was greatly expanded. Well, I think given that we really literally just talked about this, take a second to read it. Yeah, that's right. It's 2. Good job. All right, so as you might imagine, FDR was fairly upset about the Supreme Court finding some of his major programs unconstitutional. So as a result, he came up with a plan. And so because he's a master politician, but maybe not a true master politician, but he comes up with this plan that basically he says, you know what, judges, you are obviously so overworked. And so there were quite a few older judges on the court. And so he said, you know what, if you're over a certain age, you need to have help. So he proposed packing the court, adding, going from 9 judges to 15 judges on the Supreme Court. Now, here's the deal. In the Constitution, it doesn't actually state how many judges that you have on the Supreme Court. And so during different times in our history, we've had different amounts of judges. If you remember listening in the beginning of the school year when we listened to that podcast about Marbury versus Madison, you'll remember that they had 6 judges on the Supreme Court initially, and so they changed it. Well, anyway, the way that you have to change the number of judges on the Supreme Court is you have to have a law passed by Congress. As you might imagine, Congress was not happy about this. And so we look at this political cartoon over here where we have President FDR representing the executive. You've got the legislative, and he's saying fall in, and he's saying fall into line, judicial branch. This did not happen. The court packing plan did not happen because Congress said, yeah, that's too much. You're going to be violating checks and balances. As a result, though, the court did get the message that FDR was really upset about this. They ended up very shortly after finding that the Social Security and the Wagner Acts were constitutional, and some of those older members ended up retiring, and FDR was able to appoint some of his own just sort of naturally. So all worked out. All right, another multiple choice break. FDR's court packing plan was criticized because it attempted to give more power to the judicial branch, directly violated the federal-state relationship, threatened the system of checks and balances in the federal government, or violated the constitutional guarantee to the right of legal counsel. All right, well, we know it's not giving more power to the judicial branch because he's upset about them finding some of his laws unconstitutional. It had nothing to do with the right to an attorney. So now we're between choices 2 and 3. And you're right, the answer is 3. Good job. All right, so evaluating the New Deal. Listen, we talked about before that there are the 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. And the New Deal does an excellent job with relief. It does an excellent job with reform. We haven't had another Great Depression since. We actually talked about in class how in the recent days before we were out of school that there's a mechanism that actually closed trading on the stock market to prevent a crash. So these are all excellent things that have come as a result of the New Deal. But in terms of actual recovery, after the second New Deal is passed, when Roosevelt wins his reelection, there's definitely issues where people are sort of thinking, criticizing the New Deal. So they let up on some of the programs, and you have what's called the Roosevelt recession. We looked at that chart in class where basically unemployment spiked up again prior to World War II. So what ended up ending the Great Depression? It's so important that you know this. It's World War II because you have almost complete employment. Men of a certain age are drafted. The other men that are necessary stay at home. Women are in the workforce, and so that really changes that. It did help people to cope with the Depression, like we talked about in terms of relief. But the other thing that you definitely need to know is it brought a lot more power to the presidency. And in terms of these sort of social safety net programs, FDR's presidency and the New Deal is often compared with Lyndon Johnson's program, the Great Society in the 1960s, where you get all kinds of different programs, including Medicare and Medicaid, which are also entitlement programs that people feel entitled to today, that the government is supposed to provide us with those things. All right, well, thank you for tuning in. Let me know if you have any questions. Take care.